Story 1. Before the Roswell crash. I've shared this story wherever and whenever I can because I profoundly believe my great-grandfather, whom this happened to. This was back shortly right before the Roswell crash, and actually, my great-grandfather's farm was only about 70 miles away from the actual crash site, as disturbing as that is. I believe the month was September. I think right around Labor Day, when my great-grandfather woke up in the middle of the night to a large cylinder of bright light deep on his farm. When he looked out the window, he saw these tiny little shapes coming out of this giant cylinder of light. He was then able to make out that these shapes were actually tiny little humanoid figures, each being a translucent white and gray with no eyes, face, or any other features he could make out. My great-grandmother was also awakened in a panic. Both began to freak out. My great-grandfather grabbed his rifle, ran out, and was ready to shoot at them. There was about 15 or 16 figures in total, slowly approaching the farmhouse. He began to fire, feeling threatened, and not knowing exactly what he was seeing. This tall, burning cylinder emanating a bright red light, and these small, 3-foot-tall, translucent white beings coming towards him. After firing at them, the bullets didn't seem to do anything. It's as if they were going right through these beings, and they just continued their slow ascent up towards the farmhouse. Frightened, and not sure what else to do, my great-grandparents hid in the underground cellar. They hid in the underground cellar until morning, where all throughout the night, they heard all sorts of extremely loud mechanical noises, which, by the way, back in the 1940s, early 1940s, there wasn't really a lot of mechanical noises that you would hear on a farm, so this was more frightening for them than you could imagine. Upon opening the cellar doors in the early morning, there was no trace of any burning red cylinder, or any trace of small translucent men. Every chicken, every livestock they had ever owned was now gone, without a trace, completely disappeared and vanished. Not long after, because that was my great-grandparents' only source of income, they went bankrupt and lost the farm. The rest of their lives were spent in poverty, and sadly, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother died very poor, not having a penny to their name. Whatever these beings or things were, destroyed their lives and took away everything from them. That's why it's very interesting that not many months after, the Roswell crash happened, just within around 70 miles of their farm. Could there be some sort of correlation between the two? Had UFO and paranormal activity greatly picked up in that time? Were they potentially coming through a portal that these same things came through? Questions that we'll never probably have the answers to. Story 2. My Abduction. This is my abduction story. I was roughly 18 at the time, and a senior in high school. I just remember going to bed one night, and having a strange sensation, like electricity, running all throughout my body. My abduction story isn't like others, where I wake up to beings pulling me out of my room, or a bright light coming into my room. Rather, I woke up in a place that was not my bedroom. At first, I was under the impression that I had died and left my body, but instead, I knew that I was on some sort of large piece of stone, lying there, partially naked, with a white sort of medical cloth covering my loins. Surrounding me was a white being on my left, and another one on my right. They weren't translucent or emanating light, but made entirely of the color white, with no eyes or face. They did look like us though, at least in size and shape, with hands and body parts just like us. The only noise I heard was them talking, but it was telepathic, in a language, pitch, and tone I'm not familiar with. They were going on back and forth, casually, and a bright light laid overhead. I can only tell you that I was semi-conscious during this, and I remember fading in and out, brief periods of time in between. Afterwards, they were gone, and I awoke for the final time, and I was by myself. I still felt that strange electrical pulse running up and down through my body. I looked around to see if I could see anything, but I was surrounded in darkness with this one light overhead. I felt like I was in a pretty severe mental fog. I couldn't really remember anything about my life, remember who I was, and even though I didn't exactly know where I was at, I couldn't even really feel anything, not even emotion. Next thing you know, I lose consciousness again, or I blacked out, and I awaken the next morning, in my bed. No markings on my body, nothing. This wasn't some dream. If it was a vision, it was the most realistic vision I've ever had. And I'm telling you, at 26 years of age, I've never had a quote-unquote vision in my life. I didn't tell anybody about this experience for quite some time. Not until maybe 4 or 5 years after the fact that I started looking it up out of curiosity and realized that due to other similar experiences, and I'm pretty sure this was a genuine abduction experience, why I was chosen and for what reason, I'll never know. From what I've read and heard from other encounters, they were left with marks or supposed chips under their skin, marked in some way like cattle, but none that I could see. I can't recall ever being physically harmed or probed or stuck with anything. Maybe they were just experimenting on me. Maybe they were curious. Maybe I wasn't exactly what they had wanted. I don't know. I really don't believe in aliens, but this experience has put me in a different light entirely. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Story 3. Being of Light. I thought it would be best that now is the time that I finally come forward with my own encounter with what? I'm not exactly sure what this was. Maybe an alien. Maybe an angel. I don't know. I was camping out all by myself when I was awoken in the middle of the night. It was like some force was pulling me out of my tent. I can't even describe it. The best way is, I guess, I was in a trance, and I remember waking up, feeling inclined to get out of my tent and go somewhere, wherever I was being led. I got out, opened my tent. Keep in mind, this is up in the mountains. It's roughly 2 or 3 in the morning, pitch black, and all I have is my lantern, little LED lantern. I step outside my tent, and I look directly ahead of me. I'm only judging roughly here, because since it was night, I couldn't exactly give you a precise distance, but maybe 50 yards from me, maybe 60, was this being, this white human silhouette that was emanating an extremely bright light. It was just standing there, facing my direction, perfectly still, and I didn't feel any fear, but I felt my entire being just being pulled to it, drawn to it, like I couldn't stop my legs and entire body from walking towards it, or him, or her, whatever or whoever it was. As I started to move closer, this thing just disappeared. It shot up in the sky in a bright radiance of energy and white, and was gone. I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to feel afterwards, or what I was supposed to do. I somehow regained myself, if that's making any sense. Went back, laid down on my sleeping bag, and went to sleep, like no problem. I woke up the next morning, thinking about everything, not sure what I just witnessed, or what just happened. Did I see an angel? Did I see God? Did I see an alien? What and why did it appear to me, out here in the middle of nowhere? Story 4. Now a believer. Before this, I never believed in aliens or UFOs, or even the possibility that they might exist. In fact, if you told me they did, I would go as far as call you crazy, mock you, put you down, make fun of you. You get it. I thought the entire idea was absolutely ludicrous. Until about fall of 2009, I was stargazing with my then at the time girlfriend on top of her one-story house out in the country. The coldness of fall hadn't fully set in, so you could still sit outside at night with just a light jacket and be mildly comfortable. We were stargazing when my girlfriend at the time noticed a large black shape in the sky that was covering part of the stars, and she said, "Look, what is that?" I looked over and saw the same thing she did, a large rectangular shape blocking out part of the stars. Only this large shape was easily the size of a skyscraper and very high up in the sky, and seemed to be drifting as if the wind was slowly moving it in the northeastern direction. Her and I, both extremely puzzled by what we were looking at, sat there and tried to make out what we think it could be. Maybe our eyes or the darkness was just playing tricks on us. Certainly this can't be what we think it is. But then, it started emanating these strange glowing dull lights, from orange to red to white and even purple, in no particular order, with no amount of brightness. It was the strangest thing we've ever seen. This thing, for about a good 5-10 minutes, just stayed there in one spot in the sky, very slowly drifting, and there was no wind that night that I can remember. After 10 minutes were up, I say 10 minutes, but I actually don't know. That's just a guess. It was probably a little bit longer. It just suddenly faded out into the sky, as if somebody had a dim switch connected to it and pulled it down, and was no longer visible. But for that split second, or maybe more than a second, you could see it go from fully visible to completely transparent. Like, my girlfriend and I at the time both visibly saw this thing fade out into nothing, even though it only took a second. We were both kind of freaking out, astonished at what we had both just seen. That's when my girlfriend, who, by the way at the time, was a very firm atheist, and like me, did not believe in the idea of UFOs or aliens. But this changed her perspective, and I'm not gonna lie, after seeing that, changed mine. Shortly after this happened, I chalked it up to just government, and maybe there were government crafts being used. But I don't know. This was the start of the peak of my interest in UFO encounters. I spent some time looking up to see if anybody else had any similar experiences as her and I did. And sure enough, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of very similar sightings like mine, all over the country and all over the world. People talking about seeing black pyramids or diamonds in the sky, orbs, circles, large squares, some being completely transparent, while others emanating light. Everything and anything about strange, non-moving objects in the sky. Very strange, and everything points back to the same thing, UFOs. So while I haven't exactly seen a little green man, I can say I have what I believe seen the ship that I think they're in. If you, or somebody you know, has a story or encounter they would like to share with me and read on this channel, please send it to stories@whatlurksbeneath.com. You can find the email in the description below.